sit next to you.
Is that okay? But you get the smell.
Yeah.
It's okay if you're ready to put up with it. There's so many things I have to have here. It's not a regular shiur, you know. Regular shiur, you come with a Gemara and that's the end of it. Now you have to have so many different things plugged in.
Here, two are cooked.
That's good.
One, two,
You can get rid of this because that's not going to help us, so I can get rid of this if you want. This won't. The only thing maybe I could use this for is the Mareh Sheni. But you have the Mareh Sheni.
Yeah, but half an hour. Set.
Oh, it's a set.
Two.
You didn't call me an hour ago.
Okay. So,
Oh,
yeah? And two. Shiur.
Check this off
but he didn't want the...
No, it's over there, it's good. Or if you can move them closer to you.
What?
That way, just not blocking this.
Okay. Got it?
Okay. We're making enough of a mess here. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to hear me on Shushan Purim. Shushan Purim in Lakewood doesn't mean much, right? We're in Yerushalayim today. My son is right. He's just finishing his Suda now. Suda's today. And Shalachmanos is today in Yerushalayim. The Megillah was on Friday along with Matanos Levionim, and then they said Avanisim on Shabbos and Zachar. It was a mix. They did Zachar twice, right? I think they did Zachar last week and Zachar this week.
That we do on Purim, they did on Shabbos.
Yeah. Anyway. There's not much to connect us with Purim, I guess, except for Tekhelet Mordechai. Maybe say a word or two about that later. Thank you to the Troppers for hosting me again. I really feel almost like a Ben Bayis here. And Bezrat Hashem, I hope that we'll get you all to come to Eretz Yisrael. We have a new visitor center, which is really kedai to see. The story of Tekhelet starts 4,000 years ago, I think even before the time of Avraham Avinu, and I'm going to make a couple of assumptions in this shiur. Assumption number one: this is the Murex trunculate snail. That's not an assumption; that's a fact. The assumption is that this is the chilazon from which we get Tekhelet. Now, that's an assumption that can be challenged, can be accepted, but for the purpose of our shiur, I don't want to get into it. The shiur is going to be difficult enough as it is, and so let's assume that this is the case. The second assumption that I'm going to make, or that I'm going to hopefully show you, is how you do the dyeing. And we're going to do that together, and that'll help us understand because this sugya that we're going to learn today, the sugya of Mareh Sheni, is a sugya that works in two ways, I believe, and I hope that I'll be able to convince you of that today. It works that if you understand the metzius of what is going on a chemical level, on a physical level, then you can understand the sugya better. And if you understand the sugya well, it will tell us about what they did in the ancient times that today I think a lot of people are confused about, including chemists and including people who have been studying Tekhelet for 20 years in the deepest and most exhaustive way. And nonetheless, I think that this sugya has not been explained and explored well enough, and I hope together we'll come out of here with a couple of answers to some questions. Answer to question number 1, what was the color of Tekhelet? And I believe that the Sugya tells us. You have to look hard, you have to work hard at it, but I think it tells us. And it may also tell us about how they did the dyeing in the ancient world, or at least maybe it'll tell us how they didn't do the dyeing, which is also important because a lot of people are arguing that it had to be this way, it had to be that way, and hopefully the sugya will tell us. And the sugya starts with Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Amar Abaye Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. How do you guys make Tekhelet? Abaye asks Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Why doesn't Abaye know how to make Tekhelet? His mother. Where's our snail from? The Mediterranean. How do you know it's in the Mediterranean?
From
Shevet Zvolin, right?
Yeah.
Tekhelet mi Elisha, and of course Tzayodei Chilazon from Sulamot Tzor Yad Haifa, along the northern coast of Israel. Sulamot Tzor is probably Rosh Hashanah. If anybody ever went there, but Bezrat Hashem now we'll have peace with Lebanon. We can all go visit Tzor. We can see Murex Hill that's in Sidon. Murex Hill is an archaeological site where they found millions of crushed snails. It was a very, very important find for the people who were studying Tekhelet. Rav Herzog already talks about it in his doctorate in 1914. He already talks about that as a very, very conclusive indication. I won't call it a proof because he didn't accept that the Murex trunculus was definitively the Chilazon, but he did feel that this was a very, very important archaeological find that would lead one to say the Chilazon is the Murex trunculus. So the Murex trunculus is in the Mediterranean Ocean, and Abaye is in Bavel. So who makes Tekhelet? The people in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda is one in the Nechutei who comes back and forth to bring Torah's Rav Yochanan to Bavel, and he asks. Abaye sees him. The first thing he asks him, he grabs him. How do you guys make Tekhelet? Amar Le. So Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda answers to Abaye. Ma'asinam dam chilazon. We take the dam chilazon. Okay, so in order to understand what he's talking about, you have to understand this is a shell of a Murex trunculus of again what we believe is a chilazon. Inside this shell there's a tolas. There's like a worm that lives inside of it. On the back of the worm, right about here, if you break open the shell and you expose the body of the worm, you're going to find a very small little yellow gland, and we take that gland out. Take the gland out, and we put the glands from many snails. Actually, the truth is, I have something here. If you take that yellow gland out and you leave it for just a few minutes in the not even in the sun, just in the air, it'll turn this very, very dark purple. So we take out these glands. We put them in a blender, a ninja, and mush them up. Glands from many snails. It takes about, depending on how good you are at dyeing, it could take anywhere from 20 to 40 snails to make one set of tzitzis. And for here in Lakewood, where everybody takes tosos, it's even worse. So you're talking about a lot of snails. Okay. Then what we do afterwards, we take all of these mushed snail glands. I put them on a plata shel Shabbat. What's plata shel Shabbat? Hot plate, right? And we leave them there for a day or so. Get them dried out till they're very, very dry, and then I put them in a coffee grinder, and that's what I have here. So the first thing that we're going to add to the to the mix are this what we believe is dam chilazon. Now you'll ask me, okay, but it's not dam. It's as close as you're going to get to dam in a snail, because the snail doesn't have a circulatory system, so it doesn't have blood like we have, but it comes out as a paste. So and even Tosos feels that it's not exactly dam mifka bucket. It's not exactly blood, but for our purposes, it's good enough. I say you'll ask me, but you dry it out. Okay, dam karish is also called blood. I think in Nida, I don't know. You probably know the sugis better than I do. So, but for our purposes, we're going to assume that this is dam chilazon. It would work if I took it straight out of the snail while it's still like pasty and wet. We don't do that because in this form it lasts forever. So we can take it, we can ship it, we can put it on the shelf, and I can make sure, for example, like I do, that I have enough dye for at least 5 or 6 months of dyeing, so that I don't run out. And I'm constantly replenishing it, so that we can make sure that if some Rav decides that he wants, that he finally comes around to, I'm not going to say that he's going to paskin that, that you should wear tchelas. I think that would be already too much. But even if he lets it slip that he's got tchelas under his shirt, then that would already make a big difference to a lot of people. And there are a lot of people that I'm sure you know that are wearing their tchelas without telling him, the smell's going to get worse. I'm sorry about that. Chaim, if it's okay with you, I need about maybe up to 300.
Okay.
That would be good.
Just straight hot water?
Yep. Okay, so my sin dam chilazon, we take the dam chilazon, v'samanim. Okay, and that's going to be very important. You can't dye straight from the chilazon. You need samanim, you need chemicals, you need herbs or something like that. And that's going to be very important because that's maybe even an indication that you've got the right chilazon. If you could dye straight from the chilazon, maybe that would indicate that you don't have the right chilazon. We're not going to really get into that. What
specifically is lacking that it needs someone?
So we'll see right now. Okay, so this is exactly, you got exactly the right question. If you notice, all of the dye precipitates to the bottom.
It's not water soluble.
It's not water soluble, exactly. That's very, very important.
And if you would mix it, it would stay the same.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to even mix it, and it's not going to make much of a difference. I'm going to totally ruin your day. Really not acceptable.
Settles down.
It'll all come down and settle again. Now that's...
One second, is that only because you're using dried out stuff?
No. That is a characteristic of a good dye. Because if it did dissolve in water, it would wash out. Right? The Rambam says about Tekhelet, one of the most important things about Tekhelet is that it's never going to change. Tekhelet was very, very expensive in the ancient world. At one point it was worth 20 times its weight in gold. We just read about the me'il. The me'il, we made a me'il, and it's 2.5 kilo. So if you do the math, 20 times its weight in gold, 2.5 kilo, in today's money, that would be a few $1 million. And a few $1 million, if you bought a me'il, or if Achashverosh was wearing the Big Day Kahuna, or if Achashverosh's wife was wearing something made of Tekhelet or Argaman, and it washed out, they'd want their money back. So you have to. So this is the problem. It's a problem with Tekhelet. It's a problem with all dyes, right? Because on the one hand, you want them not to bond to water, but on the other hand, you want them to bond to the wool or the cotton or whatever it is. All dyes, or virtually all dyes, need something in the middle. It's a mordant or a glue, where the glue will stick on one side to the cloth, and on the other side it'll stick to the dye, and that's almost all dyes in the world will do that. Our dye, Tekhelet and Argaman, and also Kala Ilan, those are 3 dyes that don't need anything in the middle, but they do need to be tricked using chemicals to put them into a situation where they'll bond with water, they'll dissolve in water. At that point, we can dip the wool, and then we'll be able to dye the wool and then trick them back so that they won't come out anymore. Okay, so that's what had to be learned. For a long time, people were eating these snails. They knew that you could get purple out of the snails because their mouth would get purple. when they ate them. But they didn't know how to dye. They didn't know how to make it fast onto wool. That trick was first learned around 4,000 years ago. And by the time of Avraham Avinu, we already have archaeological records that use the word takiltu and agamanu. Takiltu was the Akkadian word. It's related to Hebrew. So Tekhelet and Argaman are already written by the time of Avraham Avinu. So that's when we think that these that somehow or another they figured out how to do this. We don't know exactly how, and that's going to be the issue. We don't exactly know what they did, but we know that they did. So that's going to be the issue. Now, how do I trick it? So I'm going to use a couple of chemicals. First chemical that I'm going to add is a chemical that probably in the times of the Tanakh was called neter. It's a very strong base for anybody who knows those terms, and it changes the level of acidity of the mixture. Now it doesn't change the fact that the dye is not going to dissolve in water, but it changes the characteristics of the solution so that I can add the next chemical. And the next chemical is a chemical by the name of sodium dithionite. The Gemara never talks about sodium dithionite. The sodium dithionite was just discovered or invented actually just maybe 100 years ago. So then the question has to come, okay, so how did they do it? The answer to that question is we don't know for sure. We don't know for sure. And the sugya that we're going to learn about Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda is going to give us a little bit of information. It may tell us some of the things that they could have or might have done, but it's not going to give us much more than that. Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda doesn't tell us the Samanim, he doesn't tell us, but there were Romans. Again, one of the chidushim of Rav Herzog when he starts to look at this, even the Radzin Rebbe, who started looking into Tekhelet, felt this way but didn't feel strongly about it. For Rav Herzog, it's absolutely a fundamental principle of his research into Tekhelet, that the Tekhelet of the Jews was the same as the Tekhelet of the non-Jews. And as I mentioned, we have the word takiltu outside of the Torah in many, many, many places. We have Tekhelet that comes from Yeh Elisha. We have Chira Melech Tsar that's dealing in Tekhelet. We have in Ashur, the princes of Ashur. What's the pasuk? The princes of Ashur are wearing Tekhelet. So
Ramban says
nobody would.
it's Yikar. And he says
Ramban says that that nobody would dare to wear Tekhelet except for the kings. So that's an assumption. Not everybody accepts that assumption. But the reason why it's helpful if you assume that the rest of the world used Tekhelet and that it was the same as the Jews, because it opens you up to different clues or places where you could look. Let's look at what the Romans say. And if the Romans are using the same thing as what we're using, so that's helpful. That's helpful. We can learn from them. And in fact, we're going to learn from one of the Roman scientists. His name was Pliny the Elder. He lived around the time of the Churban. Churban Mareh Sheni, and he talks about how they would dye with their snails, talks about the snails that they use, and he had a certain recipe, wood ash, salt, and simmering it on a low flame for a few weeks. So it ends up that when we first started learning about Tekhelet, obviously we were going to use modern methods. We weren't going to spend 2 weeks every time we had to dye a piece of wool. So, but we did want to know, could it be done according to ancient methods? And so we had somebody in England who was a big expert in ancient dyeing methods, and he showed us that it could be done using this fermentation technique. 2 weeks, put it aside, nice and cozy. It's like you put your cholent for 2 weeks in a nice warm environment. The cholent is going to spoil terribly. If you don't like something, then you call it spoiled. If you do like it, then you call it fermentation, like beer or wine. So, right. So it was meant to spoil and it was meant to be this. Okay, very good.
Can you
Now,
explain a little more, just a little bit more about the chemical process, exactly what happens?
I'm going to explain it as best as I can. And I'm going to do more than that because I want you to understand what's going on underneath here. Okay. So I'm just going to do one more thing, which is to add another chemical. Remember I said that we had a base, which makes, if you measure base, you measure it in units, it's on the pH scale, and we're going to have to bring that down because if not, it would ruin my wool when I put it in. But you notice, and this was the most important thing that I wanted to show you, we've got a color now. It's not the right color, but it's a color, which is it already tells me that something is dissolved in the water, into the solution, and that is just wonderful. What I added now, it's basically just citric acid, vinegar or lemon salt. I don't know what they call it here in America. Now I'm going to do something which I'll explain in a few minutes why I'm doing it. But I want to leave it for a few moments to sit in my powerful sunlight. Okay, what's going on? I'm going to show you something here. I hope you can see it. Let's see, I'll put it on in a second on the full screen. Whew. Okay. The Gemara, yes, if it wasn't for that smell, we probably never would have discovered the secret to Tekhelet. People have been searching for Tekhelet for over 200 years. Already from the time of the Tiferes Yisrael and certainly the Radziner and Rav Herzog, there was always something missing. And what was missing was, this is what always came out from our snail. Okay, so what we like to say is, people believed three things for 200 years. Thing number one, the Murex trunculus, this Argamon Keikotzim, Murex trunculus, was the source of ancient Tekhelet. It was the chilazon. Thing number two, the Murex trunculus produces this beautiful dye. Thing number three, Tekhelet is sky blue. Those three things can't all be true. Now, the scientists and the scholars and the historians believed that the Jewish tradition was wrong. Tekhelet wasn't blue, it was a kind of purple. Okay? The Radziner Rebbe could not accept that. The Radziner Rebbe, and I think you pointed it out to me from the words of the Radziner Rebbe, don't fall into the pach of the melumadim that think that Tekhelet is really purple. Don't go there. Chas v'shalom. And so, if this snail only can produce purple, so this can't be the chilazon. So you have to go search for a different chilazon, and that's what the Radziner Rebbe did. He went and he searched, and he found something and was able to make blue from it. Rav Herzog didn't accept the Radziner chilazon, but also didn't accept the fact that Jewish tradition was wrong. We have a very, very long tradition of Mefarshim, and not only Mefarshim, but so many sources that seem to indicate that Tekhelet is sky blue. So this was a problem. Rav Herzog was never able to answer. He also thought that maybe he could find another chilazon, another snail, but he never could. Okay, so now, this is going to explain what was missing to everyone. But in the meantime, I want to point this out. On one side, and I'm not going to tell you which, you have indigo, wool dyed with indigo, and indigo is kala ilan. What is kala ilan? Amar tells us. Ani, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the only person who can be mavchin bein mi shetorah kala ilan b'tzitzios. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can tell if you're wearing indigo or if you're wearing Tekhelet. For our purposes, I'm going to assume that indigo is indigo, and it's not indigo mixed with anything else. We know at least 3,000 years ago we have archaeological proof that they were dyeing this color from the tzemach, from the plant indigo. So there's no reason to assume that Chazal didn't know about this plant, and if the only thing that they ever tell us about that was dyed in these colors is either Tekhelet or Kala Ilan. So I think it's fair to assume that this is Kala Elon. I'm not sure. I'm pointing, but I don't know. I mamish don't know which is which. Okay, one of them was dyed, and one of them was dyed with plant indigo, and one of them was dyed with the Murex. I just told you the Murex makes purple, so we have to get to that. Now, let me just explain that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can tell the difference between Kala Elon and Tekhelet. And up until maybe a few years ago, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu could tell the difference. But Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the ability also to tell, not with our eyes, but with very sensitive chemical machines that can analyze what's going on inside of the fabric. And what I want to point out is just the difference between these two graphs. It comes from a machine called an HPLC. It's not so important how it works, although it's pretty interesting. But what it does is it can tell the constituent molecules inside of a dye or inside of a piece of dye wool. And what I want to just point out is that on this top one, you have one peak. On the second one, you have the same peak, but another two peaks, which means in the top, there's one molecule, and that molecule is indigo. It's blue, perfect sky blue. And on the other graph, which is the graph of Tekhelet, what we just saw, that exact piece of wool is what was being analyzed, and that has three molecules. One of them is indigo, it's the same. The other two are indigo with a little bit of a twist on them. They're very similar to indigo, but they have a little bit of a change in their atomic structure. Great. Those two are reddish purple or purple. Now, when you get the snail, you break open the snail, and you take out the dye from the snail, you get a mix of these three, but the mix of the three has more purple in it than blue in it. And so that's why you get this purple. Just 40 years ago, exactly, 1985, just 40 years ago, it was discovered by a researcher in Eretz Yisrael that at this point in the dye process, if you expose the dye to sunlight, then you're going to be able to take some of those purple molecules and turn them into blue molecules. So, what we believe is happening in Tekhelet is you've got purple that comes out of the snail using the chemical process to bond it to water, which you have to do whether you want to get purple or blue. But at that point, again, this is what we believe, if you expose the vat to sunlight, you're going to get a little bit more blue and a little bit less purple. And
You remain with three molecules?
yes, you remain with three molecules. This is a scan of what I showed you before, of this, one of them. One of them has only one molecule, the other has all three molecules, but with our eyes we can't tell the difference. Can't tell the difference.
If you would feed the purple wool into the same machine, would the spikes look different? Would the purple one be higher?
Yes, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. I'll show you that in just a moment. Now,
How is it possible that the color stays the same between indigo, even though it has Tekhelet one has
it's a good question. I think our eyes, it's how we perceive color is a very, very complicated thing. And even though there's a little bit of purple in there, to our eyes, we're not sensitive enough to tell the difference between them.
Yeah, but a regular picture. If you take like that picture,
Yeah.
if you go look at how much blue and red there is in the picture, the camera's not fooled by color perception.
But nonetheless, it's not enough to make a difference to our eyes. You would need a little bit more purple in order for us to perceive it differently. I can't speak for my eyes. I can only tell you what we see. So we see those two look alike to us. But but when you take them and you analyze them, one has only one peak and the other has the other peaks.
So you're saying if I would take that same picture and break down the two and look at them from a RGB perspective, they would look different?
They might. You might be able to analyze them and take a look. I'll send you the picture afterwards. You can certainly do it. There are other ways of looking at the ways where you take the spectrum and you analyze it. There's NMR, which is nuclear resonance. There's mass spectrometry, which also can tell the difference. All of those ways will show you these three molecules.
So the sun changes something in those
Yes.
other things?
If you look at the molecule, this is an indigo molecule. Kind of looks like this, with 6 atoms and a couple of atoms broken off. This is indigo. There's a little bit of bromine, which is attached instead of a hydrogen. That is called monobromo indigo. And if you take, we have 2 hands. If you take 1 and 1 here, then you get 2 bromine atoms, and that gives you dibromo indigo, and both of those have a purple, a little bit more red, a little bit less red. This is something that's well known, and we've talked about it for a long time, and I'm going to show you what happens now. I'm going to do a shemitz vatzitzit. I'm going to dip our wool into the solution, and now this is always a lot of fun to look at. Can you see in the back? Okay, in the terms, the chemical terms, the solution is what's called reduced, and the opposite of reduction is oxidation. And when you oxidize it with the oxygen in the air, then you get back to the color, but you're not going to get back to the color of purple. Why? Because I had my little sunlight lamp on it. So instead, what you're going to get is,
The bromine atoms are
now why do I say this? The bromine atoms have been somewhat broken, detached, and therefore the molecule here has
And
more
they're not
indigo
bonding
than it did before. Okay, in this,
And you know exactly how long you're supposed to put the sunlight to it? Or you was just a hit in this?
no, I've done this before.
You know, like a minute, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Usually when we're doing this, when we do it for a little bit longer, 30, 40 minutes. But for a small amount like this, and that's, by the way, going to be very important. For a small amount of solution, and for a small amount of wool, then it's a very short amount of time in the sun is going to give you. You all agree this is blue, not purple? Wait, we didn't get there. We didn't start yet.
Can you do too much sun?
Yes, you can. And now,
What happens if you do that?
so you're asking all of the right questions.
You knock it down completely to be like Halil, you knocked out the
So you're asking, all of you are asking precisely the right questions. Why? Because let's take a look here for a second. Okay. So, a couple of things I want to say. This is a conversation that we had, myself and Professor Ari Zivotofsky, with a microbiologist. Professor Tzvi Koren has, again, I don't know if these names mean anything to you, but for anybody who may be listening, who may be hearing, there's been a lot of noise over the last couple of years because Professor Koren said, what I did now couldn't have been done in the ancient world. Now, he's 100% right because some of the chemicals that I had were not available in the ancient world. But we had always believed that you could do the fermentation process and then expose it to sunlight and get the same results. Professor Koren said, no, that's absolutely impossible because the bacteria need to be in a closed, sealed vat, and no sunlight would be able to get it. And on the basis of...
You won't be able to put the wool on either.
And you would be...
You won't be able to put the
You
wool on.
wouldn't be able to put the wool in, that's true. But that's absolutely true, and we'll see in a second, it's even more difficult. It's even more difficult than that. But one thing that we did is we checked with the person who he was quoting. The person who he was quoting is a microbiologist, a professor by the name of John Phillip. And we asked John, the professor, we asked him, is it really true that you could never close, that you wouldn't be able to do it? And what does he answer? He says, no, not at all. The vat was actually not closed.
Don't read it.
Yeah.
The vats are actually not closed, as the surface area is small compared to the volume, and the aerobes take care of any oxygen that fuses in from the surface.
So the exact way that the bacteria are working is less important But the more important part is that the person who Professor Koren was quoting to say that you needed to close the vats actually says, no, the vats can be open.
Meaning the bacteria needed less oxygen exposure.
It does. It needs
But he thinks
needs
it's
less
about-
oxygen. But if
thinks
you
it's
have a giant vat where nothing
Then
is
you need to
exposed
seal
to
it.
water, only this very very top. So he felt that that would not be a problem.
Well, what
And the
did Sheni say?
next part is even more important. Chaim,
But is it
read the
spitting out
next
any
part.
carbon dioxide or anything coming out of the vat?
There, it may be. I don't
Then
think in the
carbon
ancient
dioxide
world
would-
they didn't
Yeah,
know
but it would
anything.
make a film
No,
of
he
carbon
says
dioxide
even
on
more.
the
He says
top.
that there are aerobic bacteria
I'm
that
trying to
live
make
there
that
as
pretty-
well, which will suck up the oxygen. So
So I'm
he
saying,
felt it wouldn't be a problem.
If any of these bacteria would have produced carbon dioxide, then you would have a thin film of carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is significantly heavier than
And
air.
that's and that's what he's saying. He's saying you
Yeah.
see this.
One can normally see a sort of sheen of oxidants that is to say blue indigo on the surface. The internet has many images
Yeah.
of this.
Now the next one is even more important. What does he say about the vat?
What the next
The next answer that he gives.
Yes, the indigo remains reduced, and as long as there is a long-term supply of substrate for the bacteria, e.g. in the form of bran, which contains polymers, and the dye vat can be used for long periods of dyeing, adding additional dye if necessary, and adjusting the pH using a source of alkali to correct for the acidity.
Okay, now that is going to be
Mareh Sheni.
crucial for the sugya. Okay, so now let's move on to the sugya of Mareh Sheni. Okay, so now let's move on. Oh, by the way, this is a very important slide. This slide has 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know,
12.
10, 12 different ways that you can do the dyeing, including, Yisrael, your own, I think it's this one. That's the one that you had from a snail that is very rich in indigo straight out of the snail, and that gives you a blue dye. Some of the other blue dyes, I'll talk very, very much about this in a moment. This is another way that you can get blue. Here's another way that you can get blue. If you take the dye and dye it purple, but right afterwards put it in
Boiling water.
in boiling water. These two are very interesting. These two use lye and honey or different methods that do not use bacteria. Okay, so the whole idea of that you have to seal it because of the bacteria, these two methods don't use that at
Were
all.
they used?
What?
Were these methods used in ancient times?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, but it's possible that they were using. Honey was around. Fructose was around. All of these things were possible. Now, so we know of at least 7 different ways to make blue. So now this is something that I'll share with you. We took all of these and sent them to be analyzed to see how much of each of those molecules they have. And in fact, the top one has the most monobromo and dibromo indigo because it's purple. So it has the most of those. All of the other methods have a mix. Some have a little bit more indigo, some a little bit less indigo, some a little bit more monobromo, a little bit less. But all of these different mixes can give you different shades of blue, some of them very, very beautiful sky blue. And all of them have all 3 molecules in varying degrees. And again, this is just a taste, because the truth is, there are probably many, many, many other ways to do it. But just, we should have that in mind. There are a lot of ways to get to blue. And all of them have a little bit of the other 2 molecules, and that's how you can tell that you're dealing with something that came out of a snail. Because if you were dealing with the Kala Elan that only came out of the plant, that first graph that I showed you would only have 1 peak. This is going to be very, very important, and now we can go back to the sugya of Mareh Sheni. So just as we're learning the sugya, Ein Adome L'Shmiya, right? So let's make some Mareh Sheni. How do you make Mareh Sheni? You dip it again. This is a new tuft of wool. And I'm going to dip this, L'Shem Mitzvah Tzitzit. I'm going to put it back in my dye. I don't have to use the sunlight because I already used the sunlight. Well, now let's see the sugya. Okay, we learned how to dye. That was the first part of the sugya. The second part of the sugya tells us about how they Lehalacha, how they did the dye. Now, Shakilna Purta Bebeata. We take a little bit of the liquid out and pour it into an eggshell. What's an eggshell? An eggshell is the equivalent in the ancient world of a paper cup. So you can throw it away. You don't want to put it into a very important cup because, as you'll see in a minute, we have to throw it away. Vitaminan lehu beudra. And we take a little bit of wool and we dip it into the liquid in the paper cup, in the eggshell. Now, what do we do then? Vishadinan le'lahu beta. We throw away the eggshell and the liquid that was in it. Vikalinan le'udra. And we burn the wool. Why do we burn the wool? Why do we throw away the
Wasn't done
It wasn't done Shem Mitzvah.
Oh, so that's what we learned from there. Shma mina tlat. We learned three things from what I just told you. Shma mina te'ima pesula. The wool that I used to test the wool, the dye, that is puzzle for tcheles. Te'ima, the wool that I used to test the dye, is puzzle for tcheles. Shma mina, the second thing that we learned is that we need tzviyah lishma. Because why am I putting the little bit of wool in to test it? It's not lishma. I don't want to make tzitzis out of it, so therefore it's not l'shem, it's not tzitzit, and that's puzzle. And the third thing we learn is that this is the real girsa here should be ta'ama pasla. From the fact that I don't take this dye and put it back into the vat, or more importantly, why did I need the eggshell altogether? Why don't I just take a little piece of wool and put it into the whole vat? Why don't I do that? Because ta'ama pasla, the whole vat becomes no good if I take a tiny little bit of wool and do something puzzle with it, which is te'ima, which is using it for our purposes. We'll say shalom lishma, although we'll see in a second that may not be the case. Okay? Now this whole thing, so then the Gemara says, well actually the two things that you said are really hainu hach, they're the same thing. Te'ima psula, hainu tzviyah lishma. What is the reason why my wool that I put into the eggshell, I have to burn it? Because it's not kosher for tcheles. Why is it not kosher for tcheles? Because I need lishma. So the fact that you need lishma and the wool is puzzle is the same thing. And the Gemara answers, yeah, inochinami hainu hach. Okay, they are the same thing, and it's basically just saying the matam kam. That the reason why the te'ima is psula is because you need the beginning of lishma. Kitnai, and all of this is a machloket tanoim. Te'ima psula mishum shene'emar klil Tekhelet. Divrei Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel is the one who holds altogether that this is a problem. Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai Omer, on the other hand, the other time, Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai, he says afilu Mareh Sheni sheba kosher. Even that Mareh Sheni, that second dip, is kosher. Mishum shene'emar ushni tolat. Don't read it ushni tolat, ella sheni. So Mareh Sheni is acceptable. Okay, we got the sugya down. Everybody happy?
What is this Mareh Sheni?
So, what is this Mareh Sheni, and why is it puzzle? Let's say, according to Rav Chanina ben Gamliel, why is it puzzle? Because it's not lishma, right?
But if you did the first lishma, you can do the second lishma.
Oh, exactly right. And that is exactly what Tosfot says. And so Tosfot comes along and says, if the whole psul is lishma, we're going to skip Rashi for a second. If you go to Tosfot, Divrei Masda Lishim, and you can look down, he explains what Rashi says. We're going to get to Rashi in a minute. But what he says about 5 lines down, so, right? L'chach, tzarich lomar, d'afilu mea pa'amim lishma, mashma dekosher. Even 100 times, if I did it lishma, it would be kosher. The Rambam seems to say the same thing. Now, remember when I put this in? I said l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, right? So, when I take it out now, the Mareh Sheni, according to Tosfot, this Mareh Sheni should be not Mareh Sheni. It's perfect. I did the first dip lishma. I did the second dip lishma. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai, for sure this is okay, because he holds Mareh Sheni is perfect. According to Tosfot, I did both of them lishma, so this should be kosher. So who holds that this is not kosher? Rashi. What does Rashi say? You can listen because you're enraptured by turning to Tekhelet, but let's read Rashi. Rashi says, Mishum shenemar kalil Tekhelet. Kol Tekhelet be'inon. Sheyehe kol ikar Mareh hachilozon bat semer. Shelo yehe davar acher tzavua ba mitchilata. Now, what do those words mean? That you need kol Mareh chilozon in the Mareh, and therefore only the first dip is acceptable.
Somehow it's mine.
Now, what do we do?
The second one is darker.
The
Yes.
second one is even more beautiful than
Well,
the first
the second one was sitting in there for about 5 times as long as the first one.
one. Do you see anything about times here in the sugya?
No, but that could be why it's darker.
No, it is why it's darker. 100%. I'm trying to fool you here to make a point. I'm not trying to fool you. I made the point. This is the point. If it was the Mareh, according to the Pasha Pshat and what Rashi is trying to say, then the Mareh has nothing to do with the first dip or the second dip. Rashi should have said, Be'inan kol Mareh chilazon, therefore leave the first one in for an hour and to get it all right. He doesn't say that. He says you need all the Mareh, all the koach of the chilazon, and I did that. The first dip that I did, everybody would agree it was kosher. It's a good color. It's color of the sky, right? So you don't have any problem with the color. I did it with Shema, Tosot, and Rambam are perfectly happy with me, right? Rashi's perfectly happy with me because it was the first dip and I didn't do any te'ima. Oh, by the way, you can see why you need te'ima here. Because you don't know if the dye is ready. The only way to know, and it's yellow, and the only way to know is to take the wool and dip it and then see if it was collect, if it was...
How did you know?
How did I know? Like I said, I've done this before. But how would I have known?
Why isn't
I know
it-
because the chemicals that I use are. I don't have to wait 2 weeks. I don't have to use urine 40 days old, which may or may not come from a 40-day-year-old child, or maybe it's 40-day-year-old urine. So we don't even know. But whatever it is, this is a very big problem with the Shita of Rashi.
Well, what's pshat?
Rashi himself didn't understand that the dyeing process was this way.
Rashi did not see the dyeing, probably. More than probably. Even the Rambam says that, Zeh Kama Meot Sheni, we don't know. We don't know about Tekhelet. So there's a certain amount of relying, like the Rambam says, on what the Tzavayim see, how they dye. But dyeing indigo, dyeing Tekhelet may be very, very different. We don't know. I wish they would have told us more. But
Doesn't
we
at
don't.
some point depreciate? Meaning, if I would leave the first one in for an hour and a half and then try
So,
to dye again.
in fact, I showed you. I didn't show you this, but one of the
Or if you would have used 10 times more wool the first time.
one of the ways that we dyed. Can you see this? This one. E. If you can see E, let me see if I can make it a little bigger. See this one, E? This one was left in sunlight. I'll turn it around. This one was left in sunlight for 2 hours. Okay? And on the next page, we analyzed E. See if we can jump into it. Analyzing E. I'll find it down again. E. A, B, C. I don't even have it here. When my colleague in Greece analyzed E, he found that it was pretty much almost 100% indigo. And all of the rest had gone out of it. It's also not so pretty, right? It's a very ugly color. And it's also very little dibromo indigo in it at all. So, okay. But it's still a dye. And now, let's start to put all of these
So
things
1 second,
together.
wouldn't we expect that to look exactly the same as the plant indigo?
You might,
So
but
why
you've
doesn't
also it's sitting in a solution that is doing all kinds of damage to the wool and who knows what else. So there's a lot of things going
Or
on.
they left the mixture in the sunlight.
No, the mixture was left in
In
sunlight.
sunlight.
Right.
Right. See,
There may be all kinds of other things. I'll be the first to tell you, we don't know. There's a lot of things that we really don't know. And I could do the same thing 100 times, and each time I would get it a little different. These are natural processes, but for our purposes here, hold on, because I really want to get to the nafkamina that the sugya is trying to tell us, or not trying to tell us, but I'm going to try to pull it out of it. Here's the issue. What do we do with Rashi? What do we do with Rashi? So, I'll tell you, everybody understood Rashi the way Tosfot understood Rashi. That if you dip the second time, that's the end of the story, right? The Rashba asks a beautiful question. I have it in here. The Rashba asks a beautiful question. It's not exactly relevant for what we're saying, but it's such a beautiful question, such a beautiful answer that it pays to look at it. The Rashba asks this question. What are you telling me that you need kol Mareh Sheni? All of the Mareh Sheni has to be inside of the liquid. But when I take some of the liquid and pour it into the eggshell, aren't I taking away some of the Mareh Sheni? So what's the difference if I dip the wool in it and it takes away some of the Mareh Sheni, or if I take some of the whole liquid and take it out? And the Rashba gives a beautiful answer. You know, in science, you have units, right? And units are often named after the great scientists that researched it. So like, for example, you have ohms in electricity. They're named after ohm. Volts after volta, right? You have newtons, and all of these things are named. So let's give units to the Mareh Sheni, or to the Koyach Sheni, and let's pay homage to Rav Herzog, and we'll call the units Herzogs. Okay, so let's say my Chilazon has 100 Herzogs of Koach dye. And I put that into the water. And now what do I have? I have 100 units. So what's the Rashba's question? If I pour out a few units, I don't have 100 units anymore. Or if I dip in the wool, same thing, I don't have 100 units, because some of it went into the te'ima wool. The Rashba answers, no, the units are wrong. The units of Koach Chilazon are not measured in Herzogs. They're measured in Herzogs per liter, or Herzog per gallon. So if I have a little bit of a gallon or a quart of water, and I put my 100 units in it, what do I have? 100 units per quart. If I pour off a little bit, I have less than a quart and less than 100, but the same ratio. So I still have 100 per quart. That's the Rashba's answer. Beautiful answer.
But that means
By
that
te'ima, why is it it's the same thing?
No, because te'ima means I still have a quart of liquid, but I took out some of the Herzogs of koyach.
But that means that according to what he's saying, if you would just add a little bit more water into the mixture of lechatchila, you'd mess everything up.
So the Rashba answers a question which opens up more questions, right? Because that's not what Rashi is saying, right? Because Rashi, it's very, very clever. It's as clever as they come. But Rashi never tells you if I have to put all my chilazon into a quart of water, or if I have to put all my chilazon into a gallon of water, into 50 gallons of water. And in fact, that's the issue, right? If I took one snail and put it in a gallon of water and dipped once, according to Rashi, it would be perfectly fine. If I took 100 snails and put them into a tiny little cup of water and dipped twice, that would be no good. So the question is there anything that you could say? By the way,
The Rashi makes a lot of sense. Because Rashi's wording is that it's Exeris HaKasav.
Right. Well, why can it be
And
like
therefore,
that?
whatever I start out with, I'm fine with, as long as it remains that ratio.
correct. And it is Exeris HaKasav, but we still have to try to figure out what. Now, the one who did not accept what you said, and neither did he accept the Rashba, but he accepted what he saw with his own eyes, was the Radziner Rebbe. The Radziner Rebbe says, I think it's on the next page, the Radziner Rebbe, is it bold?
Yeah.
Do I have it in bold? In your book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does he say? The Radziner Rebbe was the first person since Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda probably to die Tekhelet. Not really, because there was Rav Acha and Rav, Mar Mimashchi, B'Yamav Shel Rav Achai. They were still making Tekhelet. But the first person since the end of the Gemara to make Tekhelet was the Radziner Rebbe. And the Radziner Rebbe, he He did it with his own hands. And what does he see? The Nir B'chush, what does he say?
שאיני מושך וכאלה הצבע בפעם הראשונה, אפילו בפעם שנייה ושלישית במראה יפה וחזקה כבפעם הראשונה.
He saw what we see. The Radzin Rebbe said, I did the second time, did the third time, and I see that it's exactly the same color, sometimes even better. That only thing that Rashi could have meant is that, and thorough and good, and a good color. That wouldn't be what Rashi meant by Mareh Sheni. What Rashi must mean by Mareh Sheni, because it doesn't make sense, he didn't go with what you said about the Xeris HaKasim. He says it has to make sense. And if it makes, what makes sense in a dye? What it looks like. And if it still looks good, it should be okay.
Can't we say that there's some form of dyer's practice to only use the first unit just because at some point it depreciates? And then that would be what...
And so therefore you don't even
Mareh
use...
Sheni.
Right. So you could say, maybe, that why get involved altogether in how many times until it starts to fade? I'll only say that it's that the first time is good.
Like a revik or...
It doesn't seem to be that that's what Rashi's saying. Either you hold like Tosfot and says, Mamish, the second time already is no good, or you would hold like the Radziner and say, you keep on doing it until you start to see a problem.
1 second, so why would the stick you're using not be a problem to mix?
Good question. Maybe it would be. I don't know. We usually use stainless steel, so there's no belia.
She's saying it's my bigger purchases.
I don't.
So when you make it, you're soymech on the Radzina style.
No. We are machmir like Rashi. But I haven't really given you a good explanation of Rashi. The Radziner felt it should be Mareh, and therefore the Radziner, when they die again and again and again. When, in their dye. We don't. And I'd like to give you a potential reason, maybe perhaps, why Rashi says what he says. Because this isn't the only time that we use only the first of something. When else? Can you think of anything else?
Shem for
the menorah. Is the molecular consistency of the second drop that comes out of an olive any different than the first one?
No, it's
There's a little bit of...
Yeah, it's chashivas. Why do we have bikurim? Because there's a chashivas to the first, right? To the first. Maybe Rashi is saying that there's a chashivas involved here. If Tekhelet is Big Day Malchus, the king doesn't use leftovers. The king gets the first dip.
Then that's what Rashi should have said.
He did.
This looks very different than what Rashi says by Shem Zayas.
It's true. But he told you exactly, in my opinion, why he cares about the Mareh Chilazon. Why should Kol Kol? He quotes, what's his reason? What's the pasuk? Chil Tekhelet. Gemara says, Chil Tekhelet. So how do you understand the words Chil Tekhelet? Cool. Is there any other way you could understand the words Chil? What? Chil Teferet B'Rosh Onatat. If it's a crown, then you're talking about Malchus. You're talking about Chashivus. Could be, maybe, that what Rashi is saying is that you need, it's a first, just like the Shemen of the menorah, just like the Bikurim, just like the Reish Sagay, just like 100 other places where you use first. I think that you may have a hint to this in the Tropper of the Pesukim. Because there's 2 places, there's actually 3 places where the words Klil Tcheles are written in the Torah. Twice are by the Me'il. In last week's Parsha, in 2 weeks ago, and this week's Parsha. By the way, a raya, I think it's its own Kodashim, who says a raya to Rashi that Tosos is wrong in the problem with Mareh Sheni being Lishma is from this week's Parsha. Because it says in this week's Parsha, you take the Tekhelet, what does it say? V'chol ish asher ito Tekhelet.
Yeah.
So the Tzon Kodashim says, what does that mean? You go to somebody who happens to have Tekhelet here. It wasn't dyed Lishma, there was no Torah, there was no Beged, there was no Begadim, there was no nothing. So you're going to find the Tekhelet by somebody, so it couldn't have possibly been Lishma for the Me'il that you're going to make. That was, I think it's a beautiful idea, but on the other hand, how do you know that it was dyed with the first dip? benefits for Cholish Asher Tov. Anyway, leave that alone. On the next page, I have the psukim.
Can I ask you a question? You said you only use the first.
Yes.
So you must put in a ton of wool.
Yes.
In the first dip.
Yes, we do. And then afterwards we throw it out because we're machmir like Rashi. But I want
What
to
makes it the first dip? You put in, the minute you put in some wool, you're not putting in.
Yeah,
The minute you put
we're
in
putting
the middle,
it,
the second is already altered
right,
first.
and you
You gotta still
don't
kind of
use
turn its
up.
eyes off when you squeeze them one time, so the first tiny drop that came out is already done. You can't do it.
You don't use it, but I want to finish the idea with Rashi, and then I want to kind of put it all together with all the different things that we've learned. There's two psukim here, right? I have the psukim. Anybody a Balkori here? Balkori? No, you don't have a Balkori here. Tell me. Read with Trop. Read the first in Parshas Tetzaveh. Yafeh, beautiful. Now read from Parshas Bamidbar. What's the difference between Klil Tcheles and the first one?
One is together, one is not.
What is in the second one? Beged Klil. What is a Beged Klil? And what are we talking about here? We're talking about the Kisui of the Aron, where in all of the other Kalim, you had the Tcheles of the Argaman next to the Kli and the Ortachash on top. And here you have the Tcheles on top of the Aron, on top of the plastic of the Ortachash, right? Which doesn't make any sense, because the Ortachash is waterproof and dustproof and sandproof, so it should be on top. But by the Aron, no, they have the Tcheles on top. And that's why it's called a Beged Kalil. It's a crowning Beged. So, could be that also tells you. Okay, very nice. You can accept my Pshat and Rashi, not accept it, but
all the other Chelis makers, besides Radzin, there's another...
Yeah. I think Tropper also only uses Mareh Sheni. I think everybody uses Mareh Sheni. I was just by Hershel Schechter 3 days ago, Erev Tanis Esther, and I asked him this. I said, can we use Mareh Sheni? Can we paskin like Tosfot? I mean, if you've got Tosfos in the Rambam who hold it's okay. You've got Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai who holds it's okay. You've got the Radziner Rebbe who would hold that you keep on doing it until it gets defeated. You have my Pshat and Rashi that says it's not okay. So you have Rashi according to Tosfot at least. So I said it should be a halachic question. Do you paskin like the Rambam and Tosfot, or do you paskin like Rashi? He wouldn't answer. He said he's not in the sugya, but he said, and I'll put it out to you because this is exactly what he said. He said, let the Talmidei Chachamim write some papers on it, and then we'll be able to look at it and debate it, and then we'll have a good answer. Now I wanna.
How much does the ratio, we're talking about your units and the ratio, change between the first Mareh and the second one?
I don't think that changed.
No,
If
I'm not talking
anything,
about the look. I'm talking if you chemically analyze.
no, the chemical
diagram.
analysis changed when I put the sunlight on it.
There's not more bromo.
There's no more dibrom. Wow, yeah. Wait. You took me to exactly the place where I want to be. Because there is another fact. There is another way to get blue that has nothing to do with sunlight and has nothing to do with the way that you've prepared the vat. If I would do this all in the dark, the first dip would come out purple. That's what I have here. The second dip would have come out more blue, and the third dip even more blue. And already by the second dip, this is all real. This is taking a vat in the dark, preparing it without any sunlight, without any flashlight, without anything. My first dip is purple, just like you've seen here. My second dip is already blue.
So if Herzog only experimented with one time?
Herzog, who knows what he experimented with. But I can tell you this. Now let's start to put all of this together and listen to the sugya and tell us what the sugya is telling us. How many times the sugya tells us that Tekhelet has to be sky blue? At least 4 times. The first time it tells us that Tekhelet has to be sky blue is when you put a tiny little bit of the liquid into an eggshell. Where's your eggshell? What, are you going into some dark room? Your eggshell is outside. It's a tiny little bit of wool. A tiny little bit of wool in an eggshell that's outside. When you take it out, does it look like Tekhelet or not look like Tekhelet? What does it tell us? It looks exactly like Tekhelet. If it didn't look like Tekhelet, I wouldn't have to burn it. So that's the first time that it tells us. The second time it tells us
that it's outside that you're trying to do?
yes, because it's in an eggshell. The eggshell is exposed to sunlight. It's a very tiny little bit. There is no way, as per market, there is no way that you could take a tiny little bit of
automatically it'll be exposed to sunlight and automatically turn blue.
It'll absolutely
Because
turn
it's a tiny amount, even a tiny bit of sunlight, a little exposure for a few seconds will turn it blue.
Even a bigger cup like this, after a minute in the sunlight, it would turn blue.
There's no way to
But
really
this
do
little eggshell, little tiny little bit like that, absolutely would turn blue. No question about it. Another time that the sugya tells us this is the whole sugya falls apart when you understand what's going on here. How could anybody say, look, remember what we said? Tosfot holds afilu me'apam. The 99 times are going to come out blue, sky blue. That's just a fact. So according to Tosfos and the Rambam, the 99 times are going to come out blue. You have to then say, what about the first time? One of two possibilities. Either it was more purple, and purple is also good for Tekhelet. You could say that. Or you could say something that you did even originally would make it look blue. What is that something that I could have done even before I dipped my wool? I could have exposed it to sunlight. I could have done, I could have done it with lye. I could have done it in other ways that I don't even know about. But if you hold that there's a physical difference in the color between the first and the second time, the sugya makes very little sense. Very little sense. And not only that, but we're going to continue with the Gemara on the next daf, Tekhelet ein lo bedika, which according to many people means you can't tell the difference between the first dip and the second dip, between Mareh Sheni and not Mareh Sheni. But if you're going to say that the first dip was purple and the second dip was blue, then what do you mean ein lo bedika? Look at it. So I think that the sugya is telling us in so many different ways that either, like the Radziner Rebbe himself says, there's a spectrum of all kinds of different, a little more purple, a little more blue. All of that is kosher for Tekhelet. The only issue is Tekhelet min achila zon, has to come from achila zon, right? Evi shalom min achila zon psula. Either you say that all of those things are kosher, or you say that, or you have to say that it was all blue from the beginning. And I think that, now, put that together with our friend John Philip told us.
John Edmund?
John Philip.
Oh, that guy.
What did it just tell us? He told us when you read it.
Oh.
What they used to do, and this is, by the way, also what other archaeologists believe, it took a very long time to make a vat. So it would take you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, months, until you got it just right. So what would you do? You would dip once, and then you dip again, and you dip again, and you dip again and again. I'm not talking about Tekhelet, I'm talking about the Romans. Or the Jewish merchants who were making clothes, right? Until it started to get really, really pale. And then what would you do? That's what John told us. He said, then you would add more snails. And let it sit for another little while. But you've already gotten to a place where it's yellow, which means it's reduced, which means the bacteria did their job. You've already gotten to that place. So it's going to be much easier now if you add a little bit more snails. And that could go on for days or weeks or months, and some archaeologists feel even years, that they would keep the vat going and going and going and just keep adding to it and adding to it. What does that do to our sugya? Do you understand the chumrah of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel here? If you assume that this is the way that they died, then the sugya would be, Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai says, just do it the way the Romans are doing it. And don't worry about Mareh Sheni. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel is coming along and saying, do it once and then throw it out. And you can imagine that this would have been very, very difficult for people to do. And maybe that is, I forget who it was that gave the suggestion about Rav Yochanan ben Dahavai. When he says Mareh Sheni is okay, he uses a very strange pasuk to prove it. Sheni Tolas. Someone, I don't remember who it was. I really wish I could give him credit. Tolas Yaakov.
Second round.
He says, you don't understand. We don't have a base on Mikdash. We're poor. We're downtrodden. And you're going to tell us now that instead of our Tekhelet costing an exorbitant amount, $50, $100, $200, you're going to tell us now that our Tekhelet is going to cost $2,000, $50,000? We're not there. When Am Yisrael is like a Tolas, then we can use Mareh Sheni. That was one of the things that somebody said, and I don't know if that's exactly what he means. But
you can say that you put in more Tolas.
Put in more Tolas. Tolas Sheni.
Second round of Tolas.
Second round of Tolas. It could be. It could be all of these things. But I will say, if you accept...
Why would a second round of Telas for those Telas, and it's the first time they're getting dipped?
Yeah, but it's in...
Those
listen, I don't know, but
Part of the
this...
Shishin is make sure that...
The Razin Rebbe asks why you didn't put that back in to make it Batal V'Shishin. So he answers, the answer is simple. No, he says you can't be Batal V'Chatchila.
It's not Isra. It's unusable. It's not Isra.
But it's possible.
It's unusable.
Or maybe because it's a double chashiv, it's not bottle.
So that it is.
Wouldn't the whole singing earlier the Mamait Tzitzilos just show you that nobody was negative with Sol Mareh Sheni?
That's also, and also Tekhelet and Yobadika. Also, right, all of those sugyas should show it to you, but
Then nobody, it wasn't even Nischashav in the Gemara as it's at some point.
But you'd have the same question about Lishma.
But yet, Rosh Hashanah Yehuda seems to be reporting a practice. They were naik.
Yeah, and he would, right, listen, the sugya of Mareh Sheni is critical. I hope that I've got you excited about it, as excited as I am. But I will end with one thing, because it goes into the Tolas Shani and the Tolas Yaakov. The Rav Yoel of Satmar has a vart, which I quote every Purim. It's probably the only vart that I know of from Rav Yoel of Satmar. Shoshanas Yaakov Tzalav V'Samecha B'Rosam Yachad Tekhelet Mordechai. Why were they so excited about Tekhelet Mordechai? Because when the Churban happened, Dais Rishon, Tekhelet represents Malchus in the world. And after the Churban, the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Kavyachol diminished. And when the Jews saw Mordechai in his Tekhelet, they realized, these are the words of the Satmar Rav, when they saw the Tekhelet again on Mordechai, they realized it was Atchalta de Geula, that the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he uses those words, not me. And they saw that the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was being restored to the world. So on this Purim, when I think we can certainly argue the last year or 2 years, Am Yisrael is not really in a great situation from so many different ways. If we all look around, for those who have Tekhelet, and if you don't wear Tekhelet, you should go next to somebody who wears Tekhelet. At least you could be kind of the mitzvah of Urisem also. Then maybe now is the time when we can also feel a little bit about Chalta de Geula and Malchus and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that will come back into the world. Purim Sameach to everyone. Thank you so much.
Why don't you sell Mareh Sheni for a cheaper price?
It's a very good question.
And then people will look into the sugya too.
It's an
because you'll sell it for $10 instead of $100. You know?
Excellent question. Rav Tevger holds that, and I've talked to Yechezkel about this also, that would make too much of a confusion. So many people who don't wear Tekhelet for those reasons, right? For a million other reasons. Now you're going to start to talk to them about two types of Tekhelet. One's the Chatchila, one is the Evan, one kosher according to the but not according to kosher. But that's why I wanted to, at least with Rav Shechter, I wanted to start. Rav Shechter would be the beginning, it wouldn't be the end. But if he held that Mareh Sheni would be kosher for Tekhelet.
But there's nobody near Yisrael who would go to the sugya.
Didn't attempt.
Cook,
who could you go to?
Cook wouldn't
Rav Asher Weiss would be the perfect person to talk to. He doesn't hold up his so.
How about Rav Sterman? He weighs it now, I heard.
Listen, the truth is
what?
that these are the questions that have to be brought. before the Gedolim, but it's not me. I'm a Nogea B'Dover. I don't think that, and that's only one of the reasons. There are many reasons why I'm not the right person to bring it. Anyway,
Throw it out.
this is a big matchup.
No, because of the show.
So why don't you do the first time one of show?
If it comes at Beit, no, because Beit is behalf of the